The Security Cabinet is meeting right now, discussing potentially operational plans in Gaza. Your thoughts on the best way forward? The military pressure comes at a major risk to the hostages and to Israeli soldiers. The window for diplomacy is closing very quickly. Your thoughts?
I think that the current position of the Israeli government is actually the correct one. Everybody in Israel, almost without exception, wants to see the return of the hostages. There's a canard that's been circulated surrounding the idea that this government does not want the hostages to come home for political reasons. I completely disagree with that idea. I don't think that a country brings itself from a horrific position of 252 captives having been taken on October the 7th into the Gaza Strip to the current situation where 200 of those captives have been brought home, some alive, some not alive, and there remain another 50, 20 of whom are presumed to be alive, 30 of whom are presumed not to be alive. Now, we have gone back and forth with Hamas. We've had endless rounds of negotiations. There's been this incredibly naive view put forward that if we just meet all of Hamas's demands, they'll hand over all of the hostages. I don't think there's any reason to believe that. I think that the Israeli government should express very clearly that the only way of staying military action inside Gaza City, inside the Gaza Strip, is for all of our hostages to be brought home right now, to be released by Hamas. We saw the horrific footage of Eviatar David, who is a young man being held inside the Gaza Strip by Hamas terrorists, forced to dig his own grave, being forced to do so in a completely emaciated state. Just from that footage alone, keeping in mind that there must be other footage of all of the 19 remaining living hostages as well in similarly appalling conditions, just from that footage alone, we know there is no credence that should be given to the idea that there are some hostages who should come back first under humanitarian considerations and others who can stay longer. They are obviously all on the brink of being lost to us. We have to fight to bring them back, and we have to demand that all of them do come back.
Well, to that exact point, many would argue, take a deal, get the hostages home, including Eviatar, all the hostages, and then later continue the fight to eliminate Hamas.
So I think that many people in Israel would rest at the idea of any deal that will bring the hostages home and leave Hamas on its guns and on its weapons and fight them another day. Many people would agree to that. I personally don't agree to that. I think that we have to bring all of the hostages home. As I mentioned, the hostages have been taken into Gaza by way of a horrific terror attack. We cannot allow ourselves to let a standard like that stand. And I think that the second war goal, not necessarily in terms of priorities, but a second stated war goal of ensuring that Hamas is completely destroyed as a terror army that can endanger the people in the states of Israel, also needs to be achieved. And anybody who believes that the state of Israel is somehow going to enjoy the support of the international community for fighting Hamas another day, based on the behavior of the international community thus far, namely sanctioning us in terms of weapons supplies, stating that they plan to recognize a terror state called the State of Palestine at the upcoming UN General Assembly just a couple of weeks from now. Anyone who thinks that that community is going to say, all right, Israel, you can go back into Gaza now, even though they've released all of the hostages, and you can go and topple Hamas, is quite frankly completely delusional. We have to press on with both of these goals. And as long as Hamas stays there, the people in the states of Israel will be in danger. We have to also make sure that all of our people, all of our soldiers, all of our civilians understand that if the worst should happen and they are kidnapped in the course of conflict or otherwise, our country, our government will not stop at any measure in order to bring our captives home. To me, it's not easy, but it is very, very simple and straightforward.
It certainly is not easy, no doubt about that. Meanwhile, Benjamin, Arab media is reporting that Egypt is bolstering its forces along that shared border with Gaza ahead of the IDF's planned moves to take over Gaza City due to concerns that the mass evacuation of Palestinians from the north of the Gaza Strip to the south will lead to chaos along that border. What do you make of the role that Cairo could be playing right now or should be playing right now? Your sense?
Yeah, so I think there are really two questions that need to be posed to the Egyptians. If they're so very concerned about the fate of the Gazans, why are they posturing as though they're readying themselves to shoot them down and gun them down in the case that the Gazans set foot on sovereign Egyptian soil? That's the first question. The second question is that if we are supposed to believe the absurd notion that's asserted by many governments, including the Egyptians, that uniquely the displaced Gazans want to stay exclusively inside the Gaza Strip and live in the conditions in which they're currently immiserated, incidentally, as a result of their own leadership. If that's the case, as the Egyptians assert, what precisely do the Egyptians have to worry about? Surely the Gazans could see a hole blown in the fence between the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula, and because of their love of their sovereign soil there in Gaza, not a single Gazan would seek to cross the border into Egypt. Egypt's actions here really do put the lie to the completely dishonest claim that the Gazans wish to stay where they are. It's obviously false. The truth of the matter is that if the Gazans are to go into Egypt, and I incidentally believe that they should be relocated into the Sinai Peninsula, I think Egypt is massively responsible and culpable for what happened on October the 7th. I'd like to see just a scintilla of the pressure put on the States of Israel applied to the Egyptians to absorb the Gazans into their territory, something the Egyptians are eminently well resourced to do, particularly in the Sinai Peninsula. But if the Gazans do go into Sinai, what will probably happen, Benita, is the Gazans will probably then be moved on and dispersed throughout the continent of Africa in a not dissimilar manner to what we see Europe doing to once Great Britain. They get all of the migrants coming into the continent of Europe and they continue to move them along, including across the British Channel, into the United Kingdom itself. So the point that I want to make about the Egyptians, I hope I'm getting it across, is they're massively culpable for what happened on October 7th. They should be compelled to absorb the Gazans into their midst. And if they don't want the Gazans to stay there, they should move them on into the continent of Africa. One final point. The Palestinian Arabs inside Gaza are not fit for statehood. Any people that can support the actions that were wrought against Israel on October the 7th, as the Gazans did, overwhelmingly so, in my opinion, is disqualified completely, totally, and utterly from any notion of self-determination or independent statehood. The people inside Gaza are going to constitute a threat to the State of Israel as long as they live adjacent to the State of Israel. This is a historic moment for Israel's government. I hope we don't allow it to pass without relocating this issue far away from our borders, and Egypt should be made to partner with us on that front.
Gideon Sar there saying this Palestinian state in the West Bank or Gaza, if it ever would happen, would place, his words, all of our population centers under threat. How worrying is the growing call for a Palestinian state? Your concerns and also your reaction to the latest comments from Germany. Chancellor Friedrich Merz saying today Berlin would not be joining an initiative of Western allies to recognize the Palestinian state at next month's UN General Assembly. Lots to unpack. Your sense?
Yeah, so I think Chancellor Merz's decision to restrain himself from aligning Germany with these other ridiculous heads of state in Europe who have said that they're going to recognize a state for the Palestinian Arabs during the UN General Assembly, I think that's something of a saving grace for the Chancellor. But he still has the mark of Cain, as far as I'm concerned, upon him, given the fact that he has made his decision to stop sending the State of Israel the munitions necessary and the weaponry necessary to fight a war against a completely genocidal jihadist entity right on the border of the State of Israel, known as Hamas, inside the Gaza Strip. So a bit of a mixed bag there, probably restrained himself as a result of the unique history that Germany has with the Jewish people, perhaps not much more to his decision than that. And of course, he hasn't shut the door on the possibility of recognizing a Palestinian state. He merely said that he doesn't see that the conditions are currently ripe for doing so. Now, with regard to these other countries, including the non-prime minister of no longer Great Britain, the country of my birth, Keir Starmer, who was among the first, I think Macron was the first of France and was closely followed by Keir Starmer, to trumpet out the idea that if Israel didn't come to heel and submit to the diktats of the British government, that Starmer would run to the United Nations and recognize a Palestinian state. There are two things that people need to keep in mind about this. The first is that if Starmer had any sense, any gumption, any spine, what he would have done, and what other European leaders would have done, would be to say, unless Hamas hands over all of the hostages immediately and disarms itself and stops waging war against the people of Israel, I, Prime Minister of Britain, will go to the United Nations General Assembly and I will announce that forevermore the notion of Palestinian statehood is removed from the docket of British foreign policy. He should have said that, Macron should have said it, but we live in such a topsy-turvy, inverted world that they came up with precisely the opposite conclusion, much to their shame. Second point, very quickly, all of these European leaders are pandering to a problem that they have within their borders. And I want to be direct about it. A lot of people say that it's immigration. It's not immigration. The problem that they fear is the Islamification of their countries. It is a process that is hotly underway in Britain. It is hotly underway in France. And these foolish leaders seek to placate the voter bloc within their own countries by coming down against the state of Israel. The folly in their thinking, those populations within their borders are not for the placating. They have come to bring forward throughout Great Britain and the continents of Europe, and if you ask them, they will tell you as much, the steady Islamification of the continent coming down on the state of Israel will do nothing to slow that process.